Hello there guys, welcome back to another episode of E&Ftv. Today we've got a slightly different episode this week. We've actually got a very good friend of mine who's Tom Gaskell. Tom has 7 years experience working within the revenue and commercial analytics side of things. And Tom actually has found himself on the job market in this current climate. And I thought that E&Ftv would do something slightly different and bring you some of the experiences that candidates actually on the market are seeing right now. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to obviously have you on. It'll be good to get your insight into what the market looks like from a candidate perspective. We hear a lot from obviously myself and other recruiters, but also the brands and clients in the market, but we're not actually hearing from the people themselves that are feeling it and obviously having those anxieties and so on. So it'd be really good to obviously get your insight into a number of things. But as you all know from looking at a few of our episodes, we always like to start with the background of our guests. So it'd be good to understand sort of, what your background is, how you discovered revenue management, of course, and tell us a bit about your experience.
Yeah, sure. So I started my invitation into revenue management, if you like, started back in 2012. I had the opportunity to work for Hilton Worldwide in their offices in Watford, and I was an analyst for the distribution part of the business, so estate agent commissions and all of the data that goes into the back of that. And during that kind of time there, my Excel abilities were sort of intermediate, and then they became advanced. The more I practiced on the actual program itself, the better you initially get. And we're actually sitting right next to RMCC within the head office, and it was always a very loud and vibrant environment, as you can imagine, with 160 odd hotels they had at the time there. About 90 revenue managers. Always had that kind of envy in sitting in a very quiet place listening to all the noise. So there was actually an opportunity that came up within their analyst team. There were 16 of them churning out all of the reports and the data for the cluster revenue managers. And I was successful. And little did I know, it was an absolute crash course in not only revenue management terminology and the ways of working, but also the actual software packages they use to produce their reports. So knowing the backstage and back end of Excel like the back of your hand, Microsoft Access, there's Cognos, there was at the time Rubicon, there was all this information being churned into one little place, and our job as analysts was to essentially take that and streamline all the revenue management processes so the revenue managers can concentrate on doing what they're paid to do, which was more revenue management, and they literally have everything they need to make the strategic decisions. And in that little engine that they had there, it wasn't just about submitting the data to the revenue managers every day. There was a lot of innovation. You imagine 16 minds that's centric around the Excel program. There was always a slightly better way of doing things. So it was always constantly, it's very fluid, it's very evolving. And in that, I've just started updating my LinkedIn, just got into it around about that time. And through being in RMCC, I actually got offered a job with Shells and Taylor, doing a very similar thing on a very, very smaller scale. They were just bulking up their portfolio of properties and they had no reporting. So it was kind of going on a blank canvas. But that for me was a fantastic challenge to be able to do things on my own and show this company what we could do. But it subsequently led to me being headhunted with Jury's Inn. And Jury's Inn, again, very similar situation where they've got cluster revenue managers, a lot of data and a lot of different spreadsheets. So my time there was generally spent doing what I can possibly do to make things streamlined and as presentable as possible for the revenue managers to make those decisions. It then expanded into the sales environment, and towards the end of my time there, they started dipping into Power BI, which was the next step of business analytics. Excel has been around for many years now, and when you get to about 100,000 lines, it just falls on its backside. The Power BI was really one of the front runners for visualization at its best. And then from there, I actually welcomed an old colleague of mine to offer me a position at my current company, AppRose, where again, they've got all these portfolios. It seems to be quite a trend that in a portfolio of properties, you've got a lot of data all over the place, and it just needs someone to come in and streamline that for you and make the best out of the reports that you've got. And that's when Tableau come into play. Again, another front runner with the visualization piece. And that's when I spent the first 6 weeks there at Perot's, just having just keeping my head in the sand with Tableau and getting up to speed with what that can offer. And that's where I am now.
Well, I think it's one of these things where we've already seen that big data is the be all and end all, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
And going forward, that isn't going to change. So I'm hoping that there'll be some people out there that are sort of dipping their toe, I suppose, in trying to find the right people to bring on board, especially in times like this, which is exactly why I wanted to give you this platform, just in case we can tap in to maybe some people's sort of ideas of how they want to take things forward. And if they can bring somebody as technically strong as yourself, then, that would be a really good thing. I suppose coming on to my next question, and this is obviously something that's very sort of relevant to yourself, but also quite personal in a lot of ways. What's your experience been being on the job market right now, trying to find a job in this climate? How's it been? How are you feeling?
In a word, awful. And it's not to give an absolute negative take on a situation. There's always an opportunity to be had. But I haven't felt this way since trying to look for a job since 2008. It's very much an employer's game right now, where unfortunately, like myself and hundreds and thousands of colleagues within the hospitality industry, you suddenly find yourself on the market, and not just hospitality, everywhere. There is, across all spectrums of industries, there's job losses and people looking for work. And what I found is that recruitment agencies, and this is not slandering any recruitment agencies, they're absolutely run off their feet. And
careful.
You see where I'm going with this. I don't know. I guess it's very demotivating as a candidate, because you could be applying for about 30 jobs a day across industries that you're not familiar with. You've got a very strong skill set which is transferable, and maybe 60% of the time you don't actually hear anything back. You're ignored, and maybe the remaining 30% of the time you'd probably get an impersonal general response letter saying there are other candidates suitable to your roles. And it's only then when you start looking into the back end of a job advert, you see that employers now are looking for master's degrees and high proficiency in this, or you have to be expert at that, whereas before it wasn't necessarily a deal breaker. And for me, I'm not educated to the degree of masters or university or anything like that. All of my skill is based on experience, and it just doesn't feel like it's enough at the moment. You're not really given the opportunity to be able to sort of show people or have people listen to what you can do.
I think it's one of these things where you're not even getting your foot in the door, whereas before you might have had that initial conversation. You're not even getting to that point. And I do agree, from talking to a lot of clients, and sort of how I work and so on, but talking to a lot of clients, it's a difficult time for recruitment for the people that are recruiting, but for a very different reason now. Whereas before it was difficult to find the right person. Now they've just got, within days, they've got hundreds of applications.
Yeah.
And it's at this point where, unfortunately, for the candidate side of things, they are able to be a lot more picky. Now, one thing I would say is if you do have the opportunity, or you're working with an agency that has good relationships with these potential employers, the people that are recruiting, then at least you can sort of have that human conversation to say, look, this guy's amazing, I fully recommend him, rather than just, the recruiters that send the CV and hope for the best and, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I also think that people have to be very aware of the types of opportunities they're applying for, because as you said, there was a point that I wanted to pick up on, was the sort of cross-industry stuff. So taking your transferable skills and looking at different industries, because of course that will obviously be an option, because the hospitality industry is struggling. There's no secret. But what I've got a sort of almost a gripe with, or a problem with, is almost people being put forward to jobs by agencies and obviously this sort of thing, where they're sort of a head of or a director of revenue and they're going for a cluster revenue manager job. And you're sort of thinking, well, in 12 months time, the market's going to see a massive dip again, because people are going to be wanting their actual jobs, the ones that they wanted but they couldn't get.
That's the reality right now. I mean, if my personal situation is, if I don't find a job, I can't pay my mortgage. So I'm finding myself in a position where I am maybe applying for roles which are underselling my abilities, and it's not through the fact that I don't feel I'm worth the role I should be getting. It's in some respect, it can be down to a little bit of desperation, and that's that's the reality of the market right now. And if that right role does come along, unfortunately, it could be the situation where, okay, brilliant, I'm 6 months down the line in this current company. Now I'm back up to where I want to be again, and you've kind of got a notch on your CV again.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's just the reality of what the market is right now. It just is. It's funny because the conversations that I've been having with, again, clients, is they are still very focused on, well, our candidates want to see our values. They want to see, what we are as a business and so on. And as you so rightly just said, your priority right now is getting a job. And I almost outspokenly said, no company is going to ever say that they're not, with diversity. They don't like treating their employees well, and they don't like honesty and, all this sort of stuff, all these buzz phrases that businesses like to say. I said all candidates want right now is transparency. They want honesty. If you're not getting the job, tell them they're not getting the job, but why? And also, if they are getting the job, then they need that reassurance. Yeah. There's so much uncertainty, but also anxiety in the market right now. I think sort of these company buzz value words just fall into insignificance, because the necessity is we need to get people into jobs. Yeah, as you said. I suppose through all this uncertainty, through all this sort of negativity that's going on in the media, but also in the job market right now, what have you been doing to sort of stay motivated? What have you done to sort of keep yourself going? All this sort of stuff. Because obviously we stay in contact quite a lot.
Yes, I think for me, it's just keeping the brain running. Keep that thought process like ticking over. I think if I ever find myself just slobbing out on the sofa or doing nothing, then you really kind of start to get in a bit of a rut. And it's very easy to, when you've got so much stress and anxiety over your head in terms of needing to get that employment. I think it's important just to keep active. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I spend a lot of time with my little boy. He's literally the happiest little soul ever. So he's a great little lad to be around right now, because he keeps you happy. And we go for a lot of walks, and then I can try and sort of devote at least an hour or 2 a day for looking for new opportunities. And I know that I'm doing the most that I can just to try and get through it. But the key for me is just keeping my brain running. I think the second I stop is when you start to sink. Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's sort of the common consensus that I've been having with a number of candidates. They've been doing sort of, online courses. They've been sort of doing, different ways of mindsets. And a lot of people have actually, this is kind of a strange one and not something that I practice, but a lot of people have been looking at sort of spiritual stuff in terms of meditation and all this sort of stuff. And again, it's not something that I personally practice, but apparently it's been working for them. That's not something I've got time for with an 18-month-year-old. I'll tell you that. And the pace. Experience of being a dad as well. At that age, no, you really don't. So I suppose something that I wanted to ask a number of people, obviously in your position on this series, is going to be, what advice would you give from your experience, obviously being on the job market? What advice would you give to other people that find themselves in the same situation? There's a few very vital things you could do to begin with. And what I've done from the offset is, number one, make sure your CV is presentable and up to date. If you can, seek some advice or have a look online, research how to write a CV, and make sure it's in a way which is going to stand out to potential employers. Number two is make sure your LinkedIn reflects that as well. Make sure, so anyone that goes and tries to have a look for you, to see the sneak peek before even considering you, all of the information that's on your CV is in some digestible way on your LinkedIn account. And using LinkedIn, I find it a very powerful tool for job hunting. One of the most reputable ones out there, to be fair. Sign yourself up to, you can do exactly what you can on any other website like Reed, which is to sign yourself up to alerts, for job alerts specifically for you in locations. And you can even sign up to Premium, which is free for 30 days. You can sign up to it, cancel it, get your 30 days. But what it does is when you're job searching, it gives you little insights into positions which you wouldn't normally have off of the non-premium, which it would give you a list of jobs right at the top of your search, which it would say that you are the top 10% of candidates for, or this matches your skill set. It's just little things like that, just to give you an edge over the competition, will really, really help you out. And the last thing for me is don't take rejections personally. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn posting about how annoyed they are with recruiters just giving a standard response or a reply. I think it's just a level of empathy here where you can see on LinkedIn, if you apply for a job, you can see how many applicants have applied. If you imagine that one recruiter is sitting there for one role going through 245 applicants, you'd be lucky to get a reply. And the reality is, even if you get a reply that says there are other candidates that are suitable, so we're not taking you further, that for me is great. Okay, well, at least I know now I can move on to something that is meant to be, and ignore that one. Just don't get motivated. It's only temporary. It's not the end of the world. It's very stressful. There's a lot of anxiety, but we'll get through it.
No, definitely. And I think as long as we're keeping this idea of, we very much are in this together, which is one of the main reasons I actually put this idea together, is to sort of give people a platform to be able to, one, promote themselves, two, be able to sort of give their views on what they are feeling right now, and three, share sort of advice and experience. Because I do believe there's going to be a lot of people that will watch this and they will relate and they will understand, and they may even sort of contact you. Let's hope that people do start contacting each other.
Fine.
So, thank you so much for obviously taking the time out. I know obviously you've got a young son and so on, so I don't want to keep you too long. But no, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope obviously this has given you a little bit of something to put your mind to, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
A little bit different during the week. But thanks very much for joining us today.
Cheers, Tom. Thanks very much.
And guys, if you can relate, if you can sort of convey your experience or anything that you've experienced over the last few months, please do comment below. I know that myself and Tom would be really interested to hear what you think. And of course, if there's any employers out there that are thinking about getting anybody that's hugely technical, has that revenue or commercial background, make sure you give Tom a call. It's almost very... the opposite way of doing recruitment. I'm promoting a candidate, but I'm saying get in contact with them directly. But it is what it is, the times we're in. But please do, on a serious note, get in contact with Tom if there is some sort of opportunity to look at. So thanks very much, Tom, and thank you very much, everybody, for tuning into this week's episode. Please take a look who's on next week's episode now.